This is the Overlord show. It's largest Second World War reenactors, vehicles, displays. So called because, well, it's just outside Portsmouth, which was one of the major sort of selling off points for the D-Day invasion. In fact, the whole of the south coast pretty much was. And we're in the epicentre of where it would have been. On to the show. And we're finally in. I do like these little tanks. There's a whole load of them over here. These are all radio controlled. They're fantastic things, I think. And boat club. Yes. About a show like this, there's vehicles of all sorts. How about that for a camper van? Lots of Land Rovers. Right, let's be real anarchy. So this has obviously got Ukrainian markings, but this is a Polish marking, basically for sort of armoured vehicles, I think. According to the Ukrainian woman who's actually talked to me just now, that is actually a Ukrainian vehicle because it's got a Ukrainian plate on it. Kettenkrad, one of these mad German vehicles, and this is actually Bin Anaraki WL Luftwaffe. These are great things, and loads of other combos as well. Imagine driving that down the road. Oh, Luftwaffe one, WL. Machine guns. Very nice. Ferret. This is just one little lane we're walking down. There is tons and tons and tons of stuff down here. Including, what the hell's that? That's the Amphibious, is it Valentine, I think, that's owned fairly locally. It's the only one left. There's another Ferret. These are really popular vehicles.
Oh no, it's tiny. It's the same size as the Ford Fiesta. You have a look at the steering wheel.
Military Austin 7. There's something I like about Austin 7s. They're one with those sort of cars that clowns used to drive in circuses. I don't know why. Look at the interior of that. And a big Scamel. There is something just immensely cool about these things. Big recovery truck. Very, very nice. I do like these things. And another one over there. Let's have a close look at this. Yeah, these are great. There you go, an American heavy wrecker. Nowhere near as impressive as the Scamel, I don't think, but that'll be good fun to drive. I wonder how much this is. I'm actually slightly wondering what it is. It's an M3, M5 tank. Is it a Weasel? Oh, no idea what that actually is. Interesting looking thing though. I wonder how much it is. This is interesting camouflage. It was the Berlin garrison at the time of the British Army of the Rhine had this kind of camouflage. It's not as random as it appears. There's a kind of pattern for it, but everything you see Land Rover's trucks, tanks painted like that. Or bikes. Selection of Humvees. And this is some sort of Special Forces light strike vehicle. I remember reading about it in one of the magazines. Oh, that looks like a bit of a hoot, doesn't it? Look at the size of these bloody things. It's a Hilux. And another one. SAS Jeep. There's a couple more of these down here as well. Jeep, Desert Pink. Yeah, seriously, that's supposed to be really good camouflage. Another one. Another one. Another SAS Jeep. And another one. It might be parachute regiment. Jeeps, Land Rovers. They use these things a lot as well. Some British armour. I think that's a mine laying thing, I'm not entirely sure. Striker, is it? Missile launcher. And a little tank. I'm not entirely sure which would be a scimitar, is it? Because the gun rather than the Scorpion. One of them had a 20mm cannon and one of them, other ones didn't. That's some proper British kit. Stalwart, amphibious truck. Could actually swim quite a long distance. And the Chieftain. To the stalls where you can buy loads of stuff. Let's have a look and see what stuff. I guess you've got a fairly good idea anyway, it's been a military show. And for no particular reason, I bought a stick grenade. I always like these. Don't know why. It looks one of the cheapest ones I've ever seen, so I'm having one. More guns. Lots and lots of British Army boots. Lots and lots of them.
Quite often, when the US forces were rolling through a village, they'd be led, the convoy would actually be led by Harley Davidsons. And that was the lasting image that those French villagers quite often would have, with the Harleys rolling in ahead of a major convoy, and the nickname Liberator stuck. 45 cubic inch, 750cc V-twin. Around about 60,000 of those were built in the US for US forces, but also there was a very, very significant order for Canadian forces as well. That was designated the WLC, C for Canada. It's always very November the 18th, 1941. Give Jerome and the occupants of that Jeep a wave. Give them a big wave, everyone. There you go. Not sure who appreciates it most, the boys or Jerome, one or the other, I don't know. Anyway, give him a big wave, there you go. Jerome's been a very, very hard worker for this entire show. Future, about 10 years ago, it was discovered on firing ranges up the loop down in Dorset. It was rescued before it was going to be destroyed by practice artillery shelling of the Royal Artillery. Suffered very, very heavy damage to the front plate, just where you see the driver's head poking through. The satchel charge did a lot of damage, but nonetheless rescued just in time, and it's far too important a vehicle to be allowed to be destroyed on a firing range. So these M4 Shermans, they appeared in 1942 and were in production right up until the summer of 1945. Approximately 40,000 were built by a variety of different manufacturers, including General Motors. Wherever possible, used as many readily available commercial components. The Go Devil engine, the 2-litre 4-cylinder side valve engine, was already in production for some of the smaller US built cars at the time. So, what an unusual vehicle now. This one is what was referred to as a DD or duplex drive. So some of these Valentines, together with US built Shermans, had a very innovative system put in place just prior to the D-Day landings, of course from the 6th of June 1944 onwards. So if you look very, very carefully, you'll see there's a propeller just at the rear of the hull, and also a canvas skirt, I guess is best to describe it as, just above the road wheels. The idea being the gun barrel would be traversed out of the way, the skirt will be raised, and that effectively would allow that vehicle to float, which I know sounds extremely far-fetched, but if my My time at school, which is a long time ago now, serves me correctly, I believe that was relating to the Archimedes principle, but there was sufficient air gap there for that vehicle and the Shermans to actually float just, and only just. The idea being that during the Overlord invasion, the landing craft tank that tank would be on would get as close to shore as it would dare, maybe a mile or two from the shoreline. The bow door would be dropped, and very, very gingerly, the tank would drive down the open landing door and float off, hopefully, happily to the beach, providing, of course, there wasn't too much of an excessive sea state. Things started to get rather entertaining, to say the very least, if the sea was slightly choppy, or if there was a good chance of waves hitting that tank beam on. Extremely dangerous. But then once that tank actually then, driven by the propeller, possibly even operating its tracks at the same time just to give it a little bit more propulsion in the water, would then make contact with the beginning of the sandy beach. Once it's actually on dry land, the canvas skirt gets dropped exactly as you see it now. Turret gets brought down and it's ready to go for fighting, taking on the enemy. In certain cases actually firing as they were driving up the beach. Aren't common, the M3 is even less common. So this one obviously under restoration. So quite a different design, quite a different concept to the M4 Sherman. And a large turret on top. This one will have a turret fitted. I'm sure that's being restored as we speak. But what's important to say is the main gun on an M3 was in that large gap nearest to you, our audience. Currently missing 3 versions. Only a very, very small handful of those survive these days. You can tell those because the passenger seat is actually in a different position, has actually moved further effectively.
High-speed tractor?
Typically not designed to actually go into an offensive role, primarily there to tow medium and heavy howitzers into position. Very good turn of speed, 16 litre, 6-cylinder petrol in the rear. Both Zundap and BMW were the 2 major players in the manufacture of the heavy combinations, motorcycle sidecars. So at the top of the range, so to speak, those heavy units had reverse gear and also had a driven sidecar. So that means out of the 3 wheels, the rearmost 2 are driven, making those absolutely incredible off-road. And of course they had the advantage if they did get stuck with a crew of 3, they were generally able to push or drag themselves out of the snow or out of the mud or whatever else. Very, very desirable in the collector's market these days. But it's actually really good to see a Kubelwagen as well, and there's actually a really significant in large numbers. These Kubelwagens, rear engine, rear wheel drive only, however, very, very good off-road. They had excellent degrees of approach and departure. If you look at the axles, the front axle was very much towards the front, and the rear axle was very much towards the rear. Very difficult for that vehicle to actually get bogged in. Even fairly pronounced ditches and riverbanks didn't prove a problem for those, despite only having rear-wheel drive only. Mentioned previously, and there was an absolutely vast 8-wheeled example. Very, very few of those have survived.
This is a replica. Not a bad one either.
1943 white Scout Car M3A1. Very, very similar looking to the US half-track that we saw a little earlier, but in actual fact there's very, very little interchangeable between the 2. Obviously the main difference is it's just 4 wheels as opposed to 2 wheels on the front and tracks on the rear. Entering production in around about 1941, but by about 42-43 they were considered largely obsolete, with the half-track taking over for the majority of roles. One of their preferred half-tracks was the SDKFZ 250 series. Very, very successful series of armoured half-tracks. In the Czech Republic, by Praga, a few slight variations known as the OT810. Very, very similar to their from Gesturz, Series 3. Not quite a tank per se, it's more of a self-propelled gun. Doesn't have a separate turret, although the gun does have a degree of traverse. It's fitted more rigidly inside the vehicle's upper superstructure. But again, the Stuck 3 is a very hard to find, very desirable, very rare vehicle.
Another replica vehicle. But very nicely done too.
It has to be said, that's quite impressive, isn't it? The Stuck 3 series with suitable folding, and they were used to great effect by the SAS for a lot of their long-range guerrilla attacks.
LRDG Jeep.
German and Italian airfields, amongst other things.
Let's have another look at that LRDG Jeep.
Lynx production was actually taken up by the RAF. Very, very few went to civilian users. In 1938. Here in Great Britain, we knew what was coming. The storm clouds of war were gathering, and the RAF needed to increase its vehicle fleet.
So that's the end of the arena display. They're getting more into static vehicles. It's a curious looking thing. That noise in the background you can just about hear is an aero engine, a bomber engine. And another Land Rover. And more guns. And getting into the reenactors bits. This is the reenactors field. We should go and meet some interesting people. So this is this M3 that was driving around under restoration in the field just now. So that gap's where one turret will be. Just above it, there'll be another one up there. Closer look at that Sherman that was driving about. All this stuff on the side is supposed to be for extra protection. It's not thought it actually did much good, but it made the crews feel better.
I've got 1,000 bullets.
Long Range Desert Group. Foxky's Private Army. Reenactors. Tell that's a proper SAS Jeep because it's got the slats and the grille cut away.
Where is it?
Fred, stop throwing rocks, please.
All Germans. These are Fallschirmjäger paratrooper reenactors. Much more German stuff up here as well. This is one of the other replica vehicles that was driving around. Very, very well done. I think it's on a Land Rover chassis, but I'm not entirely sure. Obviously, originals of these, $500,000 or so. Replicas, much cheaper. Luftwaffe.
bless him. There's probably some not used to them because they obviously split the toes and I only wear them about 3 times a day.
A little bit more of the Japanese reenactors. It's fairly niche, I would have thought. Only my grandpa would not have approved, given he was a prisoner of the Japanese. Russian reenactors. They've got quite a big presence here this year, actually.
Especially in our position.
Russian Jeep. Back to the Russians.
There's 2 It's deactivated, release.
That's quite rare. It's a Russian tank machine gun. Russian anti-tank rifles. And the Finns. They're here as well.
Careful.
Very much another forgotten part of the Second World War. Talking of forgotten parts of the Second World War, Polish in Western Europe. The story of the Poles and the Russian army is pretty horrible, really. Most of them are kept prisoners. What's that? American Civil War, okay. All sorts of people here. Talking more forgotten parts of the Second World War. That's going to cover quite a lot. And this is the American Vietnam reenactors. And Brits of some sort. Second World War Brits again. I'm definitely not expecting to see Romanians. I've ever seen any Romanian kit before. Heavily Soviet influence, inevitably, given this is what, Cold War stuff. Yeah, that's something different. And just to round the show off, living history on 2 wheels. So that's the potted highlights of the Solent Overlord Executive Overlord show. It's held down in near Portsmouth. It's a fairly small show, but that means you can get round it in a day. Unlike some of these really big shows. Second time I've been, I'll definitely come again. I've genuinely enjoyed it. A variety of stuff to see, people to talk to, stuff to have a look at, things to buy.